They only erase people who mattered too much. That was the thought that pulsed through me as I sat alone in my kitchen in Boston, staring at the blinking cursor on my phone. The call had ended just minutes ago, but her laughter still echoed in the room. Sharp, careless, surgical. "Mom, it was yesterday," Claire had said, pausing just long enough to let the silence do the rest. "The wedding was yesterday." No apology, no explanation. Just that. I didn't understand at first. I blinked hard, thinking maybe I misheard. But she just chuckled. A cold, distant sound that felt like glass shattering in my chest. I didn't say a word. I just stared ahead, breath caught somewhere in my ribs. My eyes drifted to the soft blue dress hanging from my closet doorframe, still in its plastic cover. I had bought it 6 months ago, on sale. It matched the color of her nursery walls when she was born. Back when she used to reach for me like I was the entire sky, I had picked out a bracelet to go with it. The silver one with tiny sapphire stones. Something borrowed, something blue. She didn't know this, but I'd planned to give it to her the morning of the ceremony. It had been mine on my own wedding day. There was a card, too, in my purse, still sealed. To Claire, on the most beautiful day of your life. Love always, Mom. Now none of it mattered. She had gotten married, and I, her mother, wasn't even told. No invitation, no phone call, no mention. Just a casual dismissal, as if I were some distant acquaintance asking for gossip. My hands trembled as I reached for the envelope with the dress receipt. $528.94, split across 4 payments. That was just the beginning. I had spent years preparing for this moment, imagining it would somehow be a culmination, a quiet acknowledgement that, despite all the storms, I had made it. We had made it. Instead, I was being erased, deliberately. And this wasn't the first sign. For the last year, she and her fiancé, Daniel, had been distant, careful, whispering when I walked into the room, asking strange questions about my medications, about my will, about whether I ever got confused with dates or names. At first, I thought they were worried. Then I realized they were watching, measuring, planning. I was no longer just Mom. I was an obstacle, a liability, something or someone to be dealt with. The wedding was just the first move, and it hit me with sudden clarity. Were they trying to make me disappear completely? The idea clung to my spine like ice. Because if they could leave me out of something this sacred, what else were they capable of? I looked around my quiet home. The kitchen still smelled faintly of lavender cleaner. On the counter, a cake I had baked the night before. Lemon with almond glaze, her favorite, untouched. My daughter had laughed at me, and not in a playful way. She laughed like someone who had already buried you. And something in me, something buried under years of sacrifice and silence, began to wake up. The next morning, I sat by the window with my notebook open, the one with the sunflower cover that Claire gave me on Mother's Day 5 years ago. She said it was, "For your memories, Mom." Now, I was using it for something else. Evidence. Not for anyone else. For me. I began writing it all down. Every sacrifice, every dollar, every hour, every inch of myself I had given away without hesitation. $118,160.43. That's the rough estimate I calculated over 2 cups of black coffee and a night with no sleep. That's what I spent on Claire from college to her late 20s. Tuition, rent, therapy sessions, car repairs, groceries, cell phone bills, even the vet bills for her dog when she was too broke to pay. I kept receipts, not because I expected repayment, but because it made me feel organized, safe, like I was doing something right. I paid for her first apartment in Cambridge when she couldn't keep a job after grad school. I sent her $500 every other week for 2 years so she wouldn't fall behind on rent. I covered her root canal, the one she postponed for months, until the pain was too much. I even helped fund Daniel's startup in the early days, despite the voice in my head whispering, "This man doesn't see you. He sees your wallet." There were also the things I never quantified. The nights sitting by her hospital bed after her panic attacks. The emergency flights to Denver when she thought her life was falling apart. The hours on the phone at 2 a.m. when she said she felt so alone. I gave and gave and gave. And still she left me out of the one day she once said she'd never live without me. I got up, walked to the hall closet, and opened the box labeled Wedding. Inside, the pale blue dress, still pristine. The satin heels size 8.5, never worn. The bracelet in its velvet case. And the envelope, unopened, unbent, untouched. I held the card in my hand and read the front again. "To my daughter, on your wedding day." My fingers shook as I opened it. Empty. I hadn't even written the message yet. I had waited because I wanted to write something special the night before. Something warm, personal, something that would make her cry in the good way. Instead, I was the one crying, but in the kind of silence that comes when you're too stunned to sob. I started placing the receipts into a folder. Every transfer, every gift, every hotel I paid for, every therapist I covered. I made copies, labeled them. I didn't know why yet, but I needed them. Because this wasn't about money anymore. It was about meaning, about truth. If she was rewriting history, if Daniel was helping her, I needed to hold on to the facts. My love had been real. My sacrifices had been real. And I wasn't going to let them turn me into a footnote. I thought about calling her again, asking why. But I didn't. I knew she'd either ignore it or twist it. Claire had become an expert at revision, of memory, of motive, of me. So I sat in the dark and stared at the folder now marked Receipts, 2018-2023. They thought they could erase me, but I had 5 years of proof, and that was just the beginning. A week passed, then 2. No messages, no calls, not even a thank you card. Not that I expected one anymore. The silence from Claire was no longer a crack in the wall between us. It was a locked door, sealed from her side. But I couldn't help myself. One afternoon, around 3 p.m., I called her again. I rehearsed what I would say a dozen times before pressing the button. I would keep my voice steady. I would be calm. I only wanted to understand. She picked up after 2 rings. "Hi, Mom," she said flatly, like I was a coworker calling about a meeting. I just want to ask why," I said, my voice already trembling. "Why wasn't I invited? Why didn't you tell me?" Her response was immediate, cold, practiced. "Because it wasn't about you," she said. "It was about us. Me and Daniel." "But I'm your mother." "And that's exactly why we didn't tell you," she cut in. "You always make everything about you." The words hit like ice water down my spine. I swallowed hard. "Claire, I paid for your first apartment, for your therapy. Stop," she said, almost with a sigh. "You always bring that up like you own me, like love should come with receipts." I couldn't breathe. "I'm not trying to own you," I said quietly, "but I deserve to be there." There was a pause, and I thought maybe I'd reached something inside her. Then she spoke again. "You were never going to be happy for me. Daniel was right. You'd find a way to make it about your pain, like always." My pain? That's when I realized it wasn't just neglect. It was strategy. It was control. They had decided who I was, and it wasn't someone worthy of witnessing her vows. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. My hands were trembling. My heart pounded against my ribs like it was trying to escape the shame. But then, the shame shifted. It wasn't mine anymore. I walked to my office, the tiny room where I used to keep her childhood drawings in a folder marked Claire, age 49. I sat at the desk, opened the file drawer, and pulled out every document I had. Bank transfers, email confirmations, copies of checks, Post-it notes I'd written to remind myself of the amounts. It was all there. And now, it wasn't just a folder. It was a lifeline, my proof, my voice. They wanted me silent, disposable, forgettable. But I had my records. I had my truth. And I had one more thing. A friend named Carol. Carol lived across the street. She had known Claire since she was in braces. She came over for tea the next day, and I finally told someone the whole story. She sat in stunned silence for a long moment, then leaned forward and said, "You need to protect yourself. This feels bigger than just a wedding." That night, I started printing duplicates of everything. If they wanted to rewrite the narrative, I would write mine in ink. Because now the question wasn't why they didn't invite me. The question was, what are they planning next? The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I shut the door on their access to me. I logged into my online banking account, the one where I'd set up automatic transfers for Claire over the years. $200 every other Friday. A little lifeline I told myself she still needed. She never asked me to stop. She'd just let it happen. Click, cancel transfer. Then I opened the second account, the one in Daniel's name, a brief business loan I helped him with, under the impression it was temporary. No paperwork, just a handshake and a daughter's pleading eyes. Click, closed. And finally, the joint credit card I had stupidly added Claire to when she moved to Seattle for her internship. That card had quietly stayed open for 6 years. I had stopped looking at the charges long ago. She always said, "It's just emergencies, Mom." But last month I saw the charge for a custom silk wedding robe. $312.64. Charged 5 days before the wedding I wasn't invited to. Click. Remove authorized user. Each confirmation felt like a small reclaiming of something I didn't even know I had lost. Not money, not power, dignity. I sat back in my chair, fingers resting on the keys. My breath was tight, but steady. Then came the calls. First Daniel, 3 missed calls in a row. I didn't answer. Then Claire. She didn't leave a voicemail. But 5 minutes later, the text came through. "Wow, real mature. You're seriously cutting us off over a wedding." I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I typed 3 different responses, then deleted them all. Then I just texted, "I hope one day you understand what you did." Her reply came fast. "You're being manipulative. This is why we didn't want you there." My chest burned. My hand was trembling, but not from fear. Not this time. I looked out the window and saw Carol walking her dog. I went outside, waved her over, and told her what I had done. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "Good," she said. "You're not their bank, and you're not crazy." We stood in silence for a moment, listening to the wind rustle through the early autumn leaves. I had always thought of silence as loneliness, but this one felt different. It felt like the beginning of a boundary. That night, I received an email from Daniel. Subject, "Let's talk about the house." The message was short. "Claire and I think it's time to discuss your living situation. You've been forgetting a lot lately. and we're just trying to help. Maybe it's time to transfer things formally, just in case something happens." I read it 5 times, and then I understood. This wasn't just emotional distancing. This was legal positioning. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to control me, or worse, remove me. I barely slept that night. Daniel's email stayed burned into my mind like smoke behind the eyes. Just in case something happens. That wasn't concern. It was a warning wrapped in civility. And it confirmed what I had begun to suspect. They weren't just cutting me out of events. They were preparing to cut me out of my own life. The next morning, I found a manila envelope on my doorstep. No return address. Just my name in sharp, hurried handwriting. Inside, copies of medical records. Mine. One from 3 years ago, when I had a minor medication interaction that landed me briefly in the ER. Another from a follow-up appointment where I mentioned forgetfulness, something every woman in her 60s talks about with her doctor. Both documents were perfectly legal, but I had never authorized anyone to access them. There was a sticky note inside. It read, "You need help. We're just trying to keep you safe." No signature, but I knew their handwriting. I'd seen it on birthday cards since Claire was 9. I felt a cold flood rise in my chest. It wasn't enough to exclude me. Now they were building a case. That afternoon, I caught them in my backyard. I looked out the kitchen window and saw Daniel and Claire rifling through the storage unit behind the house. She had a key. I had forgotten I gave it to her 2 years ago. I stormed outside. "What are you doing?" I demanded. Claire looked up like a child caught stealing candy. Daniel, however, didn't even flinch. "Just organizing some things for you," he said. "We thought we'd help declutter." "This is my property," I said, my voice low, dangerous. "You don't have the right to be here." Claire stepped forward. "Mom, don't do this. We're worried about you. You've been so erratic, canceling accounts, shutting people out." "I'm protecting myself," I snapped. Daniel crossed his arms. "Or hiding something." That was it, the moment the line was crossed. "Get out," I said. They left slowly. Daniel first, Claire behind him. She turned back once before the gate closed and said, "We're just trying to keep things from getting messy." As if I was the chaos. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Lauren, my niece, Claire's cousin. The message said, "Hey, I heard something weird from Claire. Can we talk?" I called her immediately. Lauren told me that Claire had been saying I was no longer safe to be alone, that she was looking into options, including guardianship. I dropped the phone. It wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just financial. They were coming for legal control, for everything. The next morning, I called the only person I trusted who knew how to navigate the system, Mr. David Harlan, a semi-retired attorney who had once handled my will 5 years ago. We hadn't spoken in a while, but when I told him what was happening, there was no hesitation in his voice. "Document everything," he said. "Every message, every call. Don't delete anything." I felt a rush of relief just hearing someone take me seriously. We met later that afternoon at his office, a small wood-paneled room above a bookstore in Brookline. He looked older, slower, but his mind was sharp. After I explained the situation, he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "They're preparing for a conservatorship motion," he said flatly. "They want legal authority over your decisions, your assets, your house, your health. Once that's granted, you lose your rights." I stared at him, stunned. "But I'm fine," I said. "I drive, I cook, I balance my own finances. I'm not confused." "You don't have to be incompetent," he replied. "You just have to appear vulnerable, and they're building that image." He pulled out a yellow legal pad. "From now on, we build your defense." He gave me a checklist. Print every financial statement, screenshot every suspicious message, keep a log of interactions, don't confront them again, record phone calls when legal. He also suggested I undergo a full medical and psychological evaluation from a neutral doctor, someone with no ties to Claire or Daniel. "Not just to protect yourself," he said, "but to prove your capacity before they try to strip it away." As I walked back to my car, I looked at the folder now thick with documents. For the first time in weeks, I felt something anchor inside me. Like maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe I wasn't alone. Back at home, I started setting up a binder, color-coded by year. Carol helped me sort receipts. Lauren sent me screenshots of texts Claire had sent her. Messages that painted me as confused, irrational, and unstable. One of them said, "She thinks she's fine, but we're watching her slip. I can't wait forever. The paperwork is already drafted." The paperwork, the plan, the erasure, and still, I questioned myself. What had I done to deserve this? Was I too giving? Too close? Too much? But then, I opened a drawer in the living room and found the bracelet again. The one I'd planned to give Claire on her wedding day. I held it in my hand, cold, untouched, still beautiful. And I whispered aloud, as if speaking to the silence, "I don't deserve this. I don't." My voice didn't shake this time. Later that evening, Mr. Harlan emailed me with the name of a licensed geriatric specialist. Someone well-respected, independent, with a clean record of court testimony. "You need this evaluation before they file," he wrote. It was happening, faster than I wanted to admit. But I had my records, I had my ally, and I had one more thing they didn't expect. I was going to fight. The evaluation was set for Friday morning at 10 a.m. at a clinic in Cambridge. Mr. Harlan had arranged it quietly. No insurance filings, no digital trail that Claire or Daniel could trace. Just a clean, private assessment of my mental, emotional, and cognitive state. I arrived early, dressed with intention. Blazer, neat trousers, no hint of fragility. I brought a binder labeled Personal Capacity Review, filled with timelines, bank statements, and journal entries. The receptionist raised her eyebrows when she saw it. Inside, Dr. Elizabeth Monroe greeted me with a firm handshake and warm eyes. She didn't speak to me like I was a potential ward of the court. She addressed me like a professional, a peer. The interview lasted 2 hours. She asked about my routines, my memory, my finances. She gave me cognitive exercises, problem-solving tests, even a simulation of a budget breakdown. I passed every section with clarity and confidence. At the end, she looked at me quietly and said, "You're not just competent, Ms. Langston. You're meticulous." I blinked, suddenly emotional. "I'm not crazy," I said. "They want me to be." Her face softened. "You're not the first mother I've seen in this chair." Back home, I felt a brief calm settle over me. But it didn't last long. That night, 2 people showed up at my door. A woman with a badge and a man in uniform. Adult Protective Services and a local officer. I opened the door slowly, heart racing. "Ms. Langston," the woman said gently, "we've received a report regarding your well-being. Would you mind if we spoke with you?" I knew better than to say no. I invited them in, offered water, and sat at the kitchen table like I had nothing to hide. They asked questions, many of them, about medication, about memory lapses, about whether I'd ever felt unsafe, or whether others had felt unsafe around me. They didn't say who filed the report, but I didn't need them to. I walked them through my week, showed them my planner, my refrigerator with labeled meals, my perfectly organized bill drawer. Then I pulled out the binder. "I know what they're doing," I said, "and I have proof." The officer stayed mostly silent, but the woman from APS took careful notes. She flipped through my binder, stared at the color-coded tabs, looked up at me and asked, "Do you have legal representation?" "Yes," I said, "and he's expecting your report." They left after an hour, professional, polite, but non-committal. As the door closed behind them, I leaned against the frame and let out a slow breath. They had brought the state into my home. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a campaign, and they were trying to prove me unfit, piece by piece, moment by moment, but I wasn't folding. After they left, I called Mr. Harlan and told him everything. He paused for a long time. "We need a witness," he said. "Someone neutral, someone who's seen you living your life, someone the court might believe." The next morning, I walked next door and knocked on Carol's door again. This time, I didn't ask for tea. I asked if she'd testify. She didn't even hesitate. "Yes," she said. "Whatever you need." But inside, I could still hear Claire's voice in my mind. "We're just trying to help." And I knew. This was only the beginning. I didn't leave the house for 3 days. The visits, the texts, the emails, all of it sat in my chest, like a weight I couldn't exhale. Even with the evaluations, even with Carol's promise, I kept waking at 3 a.m. with the same thought echoing in my skull. What if they win? What if all the sacrifices I'd made were dismissed with a shrug? What if the system looked at my age, my soft voice, my careful folders, and saw only frailty? On the 4th day, I woke up early and drove out to a place I hadn't been in years, the cemetery where my mother was buried, 2 towns over in Gloucester. It was gray and quiet when I arrived. A low wind brushed through the trees, carrying the smell of salt and pine. I walked slowly, the bracelet still in my coat pocket, the one I had meant to give Claire on her wedding day. My mother's name was etched into a simple stone: Marjorie Langston, 1928-2004. She had died just before Claire turned 10. Claire barely remembered her, but I did. My mother was hard, firm, critical. But she was never invisible. She commanded space. She made herself known. I sat on the bench beside her grave and whispered, "How did you do it?" The wind didn't answer, but the silence did something else. It allowed the truth to rise without resistance. I realized I had spent my entire motherhood trying not to be like her. I wanted to be softer, more giving. I wanted Claire to feel safe with me. I wanted her to feel loved without condition. And somehow, in doing so, I erased myself. I gave and gave until I disappeared, until my presence was a burden, but not anymore. I pulled out the bracelet and held it in my palm. It sparkled faintly under the gray sky, and I said out loud, "I deserve to be cared for. I deserve to be respected. I deserve to exist." The wind picked up then, as if something had heard me. Back at home, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself differently. Not as someone aging, not as someone losing, but as someone fighting to be seen. I spent the afternoon writing a letter to Claire. Not to send, not yet, but to say the things I hadn't had the voice to say. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. But loving you was never one of them. I stood by you when no one else did. And I will not be painted as broken just because you're tired of carrying the memory of what I gave up. I folded it carefully and placed it inside the envelope. where the blank wedding card had been. A new message. A new story. That night, Mr. Harlan called. APS is filing their preliminary report. Early signs are that you came across credible and organized. But it's not over. Claire and Daniel are pushing hard. Of course they were. But now, so was I. I hung up the phone and looked at the window, where my reflection stood in the dark glass. Not fragile, not fading, fighting. It started with the pharmacist. 2 days after my visit to the cemetery, I went to pick up my blood pressure medication at the local pharmacy. The same place I've been going for over a decade. But when I gave the technician my name, she frowned. There's a note on your file, she said. She asked me to wait, disappeared into the back, and returned with the manager, a young man I barely recognized. He smiled with rehearsed politeness. Hi, Ms. Langston. I just wanted to check something before we fill this, he said. We've had someone contact us about concerns over your medication management. Your daughter, I believe. My stomach dropped. She said you've had difficulty remembering doses, he continued. She asked if we'd be willing to do a compliance packaging. Individual daily pouches. I stared at him, speechless. I haven't missed a dose in years, I said quietly. He held up his hands. I understand. I'm not saying anything's wrong. We're just trying to be cautious. If you'd like, we can note that you declined. Yes, I said firmly. Please do. As I walked out of the pharmacy, heat rushed up the back of my neck. Claire was tightening the noose, not legally, not directly, but institutionally, quietly, whisper by whisper. I called Mr. Harlan. He sighed deeply when I told him. They're stacking circumstantial concern, he said. Each piece is small, but together it paints a picture, and not the right one. Later that week it got worse. A neighbor, a new one, someone I didn't know well, confronted me while I was getting the mail. I heard you've been having some issues, she said, arms crossed. Claire said she might be moving in to help out soon. I blinked. What? She said you've been a little forgetful, that it's not safe for you to be alone much longer. I felt the world tilt beneath me. That's not true. She raised her eyebrows. I don't want to get in the middle of anything. But it was already too late. The middle had come to me. That night I sat at my dining table in the quiet, every light in the house on, as if illumination might keep the fog of doubt away. My binder was open. My notes were meticulous. My evaluations were clean. And yet, every whisper from someone else seemed louder than my own voice. I called Carol again. She came over immediately, brought banana bread and a flashlight for some reason. We sat together and I told her everything. She nodded slowly. You need more than me, she said. You need people who don't love you. People who can stand in court and say, I see her. She's capable. The next morning, Mr. Harlan reached out to a private investigator. I want a log of their behavior, he told him. Any surveillance, any manipulation, any documented attempt to undermine her credibility. The loop was tightening, because now the question wasn't just, will the judge believe me? It was, who else have they already convinced? I never thought my life would become a case file. But here I was, sitting across from Mr. Harlan in his office, surrounded by color-coded folders, a laptop open between us, and a whiteboard that looked like something out of a legal drama. Except this was real, and it was about me. He pointed to the timeline we'd sketched out, each date marked by a sacrifice, each month showing a step in their campaign. Claire and Daniel are planning to file for conservatorship within the next 10 days, he said. We need to be ahead of them. He handed me a printout, a preliminary court form that someone had quietly obtained through a connection in probate court. Claire's handwriting was unmistakable in the margins. She'd written the word unfit next to my name. Under assets, she had listed my house, retirement account, and unsecured inheritance. Unsecured. Like I was a vault waiting to be emptied. My throat tightened. "Don't let it shake you," Mr. Harlan said gently. "This is where we fight smart." We went through everything. The doctor's evaluation, the APS visit report, which had been neutral but leaned slightly in my favor, the logs from Carol, the audio recordings I had legally made of certain calls, even the pharmacy incident, each moment a brick in the wall I was building to defend myself. We also recorded a formal video affidavit, just in case. Me, speaking directly to the camera, stating that I was of sound mind and aware of everything happening around me. It felt surreal, but also empowering. That night, alone in my house, I opened a box I hadn't touched in years. My journals, decades of scribbles, birthday notes, receipts taped into pages, messy handwriting documenting every big moment in Claire's life. Her first day of school, her broken ankle at 16, her college graduation. And next to each entry, a note about what I gave up. A shift missed, a vacation cancelled, a loan extended. It wasn't just money. It was life, poured year after year into someone who now saw me as inconvenient. I stayed up until dawn, marking pages I would submit as character evidence. Not just of who I am, but who I've always been. By morning, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Readiness. Mr. Harlan called at 8:15 sharp. "It's official," he said. "They filed the conservatorship motion this morning. Hearing is in 6 days." My heart dropped. 6 days. 6 days to prove I deserved ownership of my own life. Later that afternoon, Carol stopped by. She brought coffee, hugged me tightly, and said, "I talked to Lauren. She's willing to testify. She saw what they did. She believes you." I closed my eyes, grateful. Every witness counted now. Before she left, I showed Carol something. The bracelet. I told her the story. The wedding. The blank card. She looked at it, touched the tiny blue stones, and said, "Bring this to court." Why? Because it's not just a gift. It's a question. Who abandons someone holding this much love for them? That night, I placed the bracelet in a small velvet pouch and added it to my bag of exhibits. 6 days. A courtroom. My daughter. And the truth. The courthouse in downtown Boston was quiet the morning of the hearing. The kind of sterile silence that amplifies every heel click, every breath, every paper shuffle. I arrived early, pressed blouse, hair tied back, eyes clear. Carol came with me. So did Lauren, Mr. Harlan met us inside, his briefcase already open, documents lined up like chess pieces. "You speak only when asked," he said. "Let me lead. You don't have to prove you're lovable. You only need to prove you're competent." I nodded, but my heart was trembling. When Claire and Daniel walked in, my breath caught. She wore a black blazer, minimal makeup, her hair pinned tightly back. She looked like a professional witness, composed and prepared. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. Daniel, on the other hand, gave me a brief nod. Like he was greeting a stranger he once knew, in a different life. The judge, a woman in her late 50s named Hon Marcia Kendall, entered, stern, measured, clearly not one for dramatics. The hearing began. Daniel spoke first. He painted a picture. a devoted son-in-law trying to help his wife through a difficult time. A daughter who watched her mother struggle with consistency, miss appointments, and forget who called her the day before. Claire was next. She began gently, sympathetically. "I love my mom," she said. I don't think she realizes how much she's slipping. We want to protect her, not punish her." Then came the details. She once left the stove on overnight. She thought my wedding was next month, not last week. She transferred money to the wrong account and didn't notice for days. I sat there, stunned. Some of it was true. Versions of the truth, twisted just enough to raise doubt. The stove? It had been a warm burner, not on overnight. The wedding? She never told me the date, the transfer. A minor typo I caught the same day. But in court, nuance doesn't always matter. Perception does. Claire's voice quivered just enough when she said, "She needs help, and I'm trying to give it." The judge nodded, took notes. Then Mr. Harlan stood. He asked for my psychological evaluation to be submitted into the record. He submitted my APS report. He asked for the binder of financial documentation, the call logs, and the pharmacy note. He called Lauren to the stand. Lauren, bless her heart, told the truth. She read aloud the messages Claire had sent her. She looked the judge in the eye and said, "My aunt is the sharpest person I know. What they're doing isn't protection, it's strategy." Then it was Carol's turn. She described our tea conversations, the quiet strength she'd witnessed in me. She told the court how she'd watched Claire and Daniel minimize and isolate me. She ended with, "She's not fading, she's fighting, and she deserves to." And finally, it was my turn. I stood slowly, walked to the center. My hands didn't shake. I looked at Claire. She still wouldn't meet my gaze. "I've been her mother longer than she's been an adult," I said softly. "I've seen her fall and rise again, and I never counted the cost. But now she wants to call my love a liability." I reached into my bag and held up the velvet pouch. Inside, the bracelet. I saved this for her wedding day. She never asked me to. I just did, because that's what love looks like. I looked at the judge. "I am not broken. I am not fading. I'm still here." I stepped back and waited. The judge looked down, scribbled something, and said, "We'll resume with expert testimony tomorrow." My knees nearly gave out. Claire finally looked at me, just for a moment, and what I saw in her eyes was not guilt. It was fear. The second day of the hearing began with a quiet intensity, like the moment before a storm breaks. This time, the gallery had more people. Someone from the local paper, a social worker from APS, and even the pharmacist who'd been subpoenaed by Mr. Harlan. I took my seat beside him again, hands resting on the velvet pouch that held the bracelet. I didn't wear it. I didn't need to. Its weight in my palm was enough to remind me why I was there. Judge Kendall called the session to order and began with the court-appointed medical expert, Dr. Elizabeth Monroe. She took the stand with poise and precision. She described my cognitive testing in full detail. Executive functioning, memory recall, logical reasoning. She scored in the top 15th percentile for her age group, Dr. Monroe said, flipping through her report. She demonstrates full capacity to manage her own affairs. Claire shifted in her seat. Dr. Monroe continued, "There is no medical or psychological basis to declare her unfit. I see no evidence of dementia, disorientation, or impairment." The judge looked over her glasses and asked, "Is there any indication of vulnerability that would justify conservatorship?" Dr. Monroe shook her head once. "None that would meet legal or ethical standards." Then came the private investigator's report. He wasn't called to the stand, but Mr. Harlan submitted his logs as evidence. Notes of Daniel and Claire entering my property without permission. Audio of Daniel discussing my assets over drinks with a friend. Screenshots of Claire contacting multiple elder care attorneys in May, 2 months before the wedding. The judge's expression remained neutral, but her pen slowed down. Finally, Mr. Harlan presented the binder. Not just a stack of receipts, a timeline of care. He narrated as he flipped through. The rent payments, therapy invoices, tuition receipts, grocery orders. One by one, he built a portrait, not of a woman declining, but of a woman who had held up another's life for decades. He ended with a photo. Claire at age 9, sitting in my lap, wearing the bracelet I had planned to give her as a bride, her smile wide, my arms wrapped around her. Silence filled the courtroom. The judge looked at Claire. "Do you have any rebuttal?" Claire stood. For a moment, her voice cracked. "She's not the same," she whispered. "She's changed." The judge leaned forward. "That may be true, but change is not incompetence." Then slowly she turned to me. "Ms. Langston," she said, "you are within your rights to make your own decisions. This court sees no evidence to warrant a conservatorship." The gavel came down. Case dismissed. I didn't cry. I didn't look at Claire. I simply reached into my bag, held the bracelet in my hand, and exhaled a breath I didn't know I had been holding for 5 years. Claire and Daniel left the courtroom without a word, but the damage had already been done, and the truth had already been seen. I stayed seated after the gavel struck. Everyone else began to move. The clerk collecting papers, the court reporter packing up her equipment, even Mr. Harlan quietly zipping his briefcase. But I didn't move. I couldn't. Not yet. Across the aisle, Claire stood with her arms folded, her face pale and tight. Daniel leaned in to say something, but she didn't respond. For a moment, she looked like the teenager she once was, angry, cornered, and deeply uncertain. But not once did she look at me. Mr. Harlan touched my shoulder gently. "You won, Helen." But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like walking away from a burning house. The one you built, the one you protected, the one you believed would always shelter you. And now, it stood hollow. Ashes where a family should have been. Outside the courthouse, Carol and Lauren were waiting. Lauren rushed to hug me first. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have spoken up sooner." "You did," I whispered. "You did it when it mattered." Reporters were already gathering at the steps, sensing the scent of a scandal. Daughter attempts to seize control of aging mother's estate. Mother proves she's mentally sound. They wanted the spectacle. But I gave them nothing. No statements, no anger, just dignity. The drive home was quiet. Mr. Harlan had offered to follow me, just in case. But I told him no. I needed the silence. I needed to feel the weight of the moment alone. When I reached my house, the sun was setting. That soft golden hour light that made everything look warmer than it really was. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the folder still in my purse, now stamped with "Case dismissed." I placed the bracelet on the counter and just stared at it. How did we get here? I thought back to every late night I sat by Claire's bed with a cold compress on her forehead, whispering stories until she fell asleep. To the day she got accepted into college, when I danced in the living room while she cried in my arms. To the phone call at 2 a.m. after her first breakup, when she said, "You're the only person who makes me feel safe." And then, I thought of her face in that courtroom, set, calculating, distant. Something inside me broke quietly. Not with fury, not with pain, with finality. The next morning, an envelope arrived. Claire had left it in my mailbox. Inside was a single handwritten note. I didn't think you'd fight me. I thought you'd just let go. I guess I underestimated you. Claire! No apology. Just acknowledgement. She had tried to take everything, and failed. But the cost was permanent. I folded the note and placed it next to the bracelet, and I whispered, "You didn't underestimate me. You forgot who raised you." It's been 7 months since the hearing. I haven't heard from Claire since the letter. No calls, no visits, not even a birthday message. At first, I waited. I told myself that maybe she needed time, that maybe guilt would open a door she had slammed shut. But eventually, I stopped waiting, and when I did, something unexpected happened. I started breathing again. I enrolled in a watercolor class at the local art center. I joined a book club at the library downtown. Not the kind where people gossip, but the kind where silence is respected and stories matter. I took a 3-day train trip to Vermont, just for the view. I donated half my wardrobe to a shelter, and for the first time in decades, my closet looked like it belonged to someone who lives her own life. I also rewrote my will. It now includes Lauren and Carol, and a small scholarship fund for adult women going back to school at 40 or older. Not because I'm bitter, but because I've learned that love without limits becomes a wound. And boundaries, they don't destroy love, they define it. I still think about Claire every day. I think about the way she laughed as a little girl, the way she used to fall asleep with her head in my lap on long car rides. I don't pretend those memories didn't happen. I don't erase them. I honor them. But I no longer confuse the past with the present, and I no longer let my worth be measured by someone else's memory. Last week, I found the bracelet again. It was still in the velvet pouch tucked in the drawer where I left it after the trial. I held it in my hand, feeling the smoothness of the stones, the delicate weight of it, and I smiled. It no longer felt like a gift that was rejected. It felt like a piece of me I had taken back. One evening during my art class, the instructor asked us to paint a scene from a memory we wished we could relive. Everyone else painted landscapes, beaches, family gatherings. I painted a blue bracelet in the palm of a hand, and beneath it, I wrote the words, "I gave everything, and still I am whole." Because I am. More whole now than I've ever been. And if you're listening to this, if you've ever felt erased or manipulated or made to feel invisible by someone you raised with love, please hear me. You're still here. You still matter. You're still yours. There's a quiet power in not being needed anymore. At first, I thought it would destroy me, to no longer be the mother who fixes everything, who pays, who shows up, who waits by the phone. But what I didn't realize is that freedom often arrives dressed as loss. My home is different now, quieter, but not hollow. The air feels lighter. The rooms feel mine again. I've rearranged the furniture, started growing herbs by the kitchen window. I even adopted a small rescue dog, Penny. She follows me everywhere, curls up beside me while I paint, and wags her tail like I'm the most important person in her world. And sometimes, that's enough. I still walk past the closet where the blue dress hangs. I haven't thrown it away. I don't know if I ever will, but I no longer see it as a symbol of rejection. Now it's a reminder of what I gave, of what I hoped, and of what I survived. People sometimes say that motherhood is a lifelong contract, but contracts require mutual agreement. When one side breaks it, when love is used as leverage, when memory is rewritten, then it's not a contract anymore. It's a form of control. I didn't set out to fight, but I did. I didn't set out to win, but I did. And more than that, I reclaimed myself. The woman I used to be, before all the giving made me disappear. So if you're listening to this, and you feel like your love has been weaponized against you, I want you to hear me when I say, you are allowed to say no. You are allowed to protect your peace, and you are allowed to keep your softness, even while building your spine of steel. Love isn't proven through sacrifice alone. Sometimes love is proven through limits, because real love doesn't erase you. It makes space for you. And if they can't love the version of you that says, enough, they never loved you fully in the first place. I'll end with something my lawyer said to me after the hearing. The ones who try to take your voice are always the most afraid of hearing it. I know that now. And my voice, it's stronger than it's ever been. I survived the people I loved the most. And somehow, I still have love left. For myself.